Good morning. Good morning to the participants in this important discussion. I was teasing Michel when we came in. I remember when I was a lawyer, the conferences or the seminars that one would attend were usually that critical family law conference in Hawaii in January, or that very important criminal procedure course that you take at Mont Tremblant. And you didn't have to apply and be accepted to go. They would just take your registration and surprise, surprise, you'd go with your family for that important weeks-long conference. But here you actually had a rigorous process of people interested in this policy area, committed to making, I hope, significant progress. And I certainly thank the organizations and the Montreal Economic Institute in particular for having taken the lead. I'm familiar with the work of the Atlantic Institute of Market Studies. It is important to the economic policy generation in a part of the country that I'm obviously very attached to, Atlantic Canada. Alors pour tout ça, Michel, je vous remercie, vous et vos collègues, pour avoir pris cette initiative. J'étais un peu gêné que la cause Como vient de ma province au Nouveau-Brunswick. You were talking about the Como case. It's unfortunate that it's from my province. In fact, I wanted to have a meeting of interprovincial trade ministers this fall. We'll probably do one early in the new year. And I actually thought the interesting place to have it would be in Campbellton, New Brunswick, where the bridge right behind is the bridge that crosses to Pointe-à-la-Croix, Quebec, where Mr. Como loaded up his van full of beer. That's not a new thing. You're right, it felt like an RCMP operation, and probably by Como himself, who obviously had the courage and I thought the insight to take this case as far as he did with the help of the people you said, Michel. But it reminded me a lot of my cousins from New Brunswick, sort of the spring's coming, the summer's on its way. Somebody's going to take a van and drive to Pointe-à-la-Croix, Quebec. Does anybody need a couple of cases of beer? It has become an example of, frankly, where some of these barriers have lost their way. Puis, c'est pour les Canadiens avec lesquels moi j'ai discuté, c'est un exemple un peu flagrant de comment ça se fait qu'au fil des années, une série de mesures ont vraiment eu des effets un peu pervers, et je suis content que vous allez utiliser ça comme une raison de continuer votre travail. So switching from Mr. Como and the beer, imagine for a moment that you work for a company that has operations all across Canada. Your boss comes to you with what would be a simple task to buy first aid kits for your colleagues, for the workers in your business. Seems like a simple assignment, right? No problem. Buying first aid kits for people, let's say, who work in a trucking company or some other industrial operation with operations across the country. You want to make sure you buy the right kits, obviously, so you go online, you look at the regulations, you double-check the details, and you'd put in an order for the number of first aid kits you need. Great job. You've actually picked the first aid kit for your employees in Ontario. For your workers in Manitoba, for example, provincial guidelines require a slightly different kit with slightly different contents. The same goes for Alberta and for Nova Scotia. Some mandate a minimum number of bandages that need to be in the kit. Others don't. Instead, they say there needs to be an adequate number of bandages. All in all, 8 provinces and territories across the country require different types of first aid kits for their workers. So all of a sudden, an assignment from your boss doesn't suddenly seem so simple. You could be out winning new customers, increasing sales, improving the productivity of your business. Instead, you're up to your eyeballs in fine print dealing with regulations in 8 different jurisdictions across the country. You're dealing with multiple and often conflicting specifications. Ce n'est qu'un exemple simple de nombreux obstacles à la compétitivité économique de notre pays. Bien sûr, les obstacles au commerce de l'alcool, comme Michel a bien identifié, attirent l'attention publique. Mais dans plusieurs secteurs, il existe des différences entre les provinces et territoires qui ont des conséquences pour la productivité et la compétitivité des entreprises et de notre économie en général. As Michel noted in his introductory comments, we are a trading nation. We pride ourselves on being open to the world. In the last few years, We have reached historic trade deals with Europe, the United States and Mexico, as was noted a few minutes ago, and several large Pacific nations as well. In those negotiations, we talked about the importance of an open exchange of goods and services and the benefits that brings to businesses and workers alike in all trading partners. That way, it supports the kind of economic growth that creates jobs, but maintains the prosperity that Canadians expect. We need to follow our own advice and bring that same attitude to the way we trade with each other within Canada by addressing the complex patchwork of rules and regulations that stifle growth, increase costs on businesses, raise prices, and ultimately end up hurting Canadian workers. Our government, we think, has a solid track record of trying to advance policies that support the middle class. We cut taxes for 9 million middle-class Canadians and offered more money to families in 9 out of 10 families through a new Canada Child benefit. Since the fall of 2015, the Canadian economy has created over 500,000 new jobs, and parents, for example, now have the choice to extend parental leave to 18 months. But we know that increasing trade between provinces and territories will also help those same people. Trade between provinces and territories makes up about 1/5 of Canada's annual GDP, or about $370 billion a year. The Bank of Canada has estimated that lifting barriers to internal trade could add up to $4 billion to our economy every year. A healthier economy means more jobs and obviously a better quality of life for Canadians. That is a major focus of my work as the minister responsible for internal trade. And as I said, it's nice to see people like all of you here this morning focusing on the policy and legislative and regulatory impediments, and I look forward, I hope, to receiving your advice, your suggestions, and to following up in subsequent conversations. As Michelle noted, we have made some progress as a country in recent years. The federal government last year, led by my colleague, our Innovation Minister Navdeep Bains, and all 13 provinces and territories signed the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, which holds the potential to open up trade within our borders in virtually every sector of the economy. But as was noted, the devil is always in the details, and the lists of exemptions and reasons why certain products and certain sectors will, over time, at certain tables be discussed, is and has been the inevitable challenge of this conversation for decades. But for instance, it's already easier for businesses to sell to governments across the country. A small company in Halifax or Winnipeg now has the opportunity to secure contracts from all orders of government across the country. For the first time ever, Canadian companies operating in certain regulated professions, for example, engineering and architecture, are able to compete for government contracts across the country. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement is by no means perfect, but we think it is a starting point for more action, for bolder action, and for more aggressive action. There still is a lot of work to be done to remove the barriers that still exist in terms of trade between provinces and territories. We think there's a momentum to build on the Canadian Free Trade Agreement and reach a new consensus that will benefit the Canadian economy and Canadian workers. I'll say it again. We can't fully take on the new challenges and seize properly new opportunities as a country if we're still caught up in old regulations. We understand the competitive nature of the modern world and the global economy. We understand that our prosperity depends on our ability to keep our economy strong, to trade with others, but also to trade amongst ourselves more efficiently. So, what as a government are we doing to generate the progress that all of us hope to achieve on internal trade? First of all, we're prepared to take action on our own. We recognize that this is a two-way street. The federal government itself has a role to play in growing the next generation of globally competitive Canadian companies. I say to provincial ministers and provincial premiers in conversations I have on internal trade that I pretend by no means that the Government of Canada itself doesn't have work that we can do in terms of our own regulations and our own policies to remove things that have become, over time, barriers to trade. So I'm working with all of my cabinet colleagues on an aggressive and specific timetable to arrive at discussions with provinces and first ministers where we can produce our own list of things that we're prepared to do immediately to remove federal barriers to trade between provinces and territories. Provincial ministers, business leaders have offered suggestions to us of where federal regulations and federal policies can be improved to remove these barriers to trade between provinces and territories. And as I said to Michel, and I'll say to all of you, I hope very much at the end of this conversation today, but in the coming weeks, all of you will share with us and with me your ideas of precise and specific federal actions we can take as quickly as we possibly can to show that we're serious about this, but also to inspire our provincial and territorial partners to join us in this work as well. To that end, we have been introducing as a government regulatory reform, repealing certain discriminatory or outdated measures, and otherwise building, as I said, on the momentum of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. But we're looking at what more we can do to eliminate these unnecessary regulations in the federal sphere. And I look forward, I hope with my provincial and territorial colleagues, to announcing real progress, significant measures on this in the coming weeks. And again, I would welcome your advice and suggestions as we try and improve the federal area of jurisdiction in this regard. Secondly, as you know, the Prime Minister is going to be hosting a First Ministers meeting later this fall. The purpose of this meeting, and the Prime Minister was very clear when he announced that in July, the purpose of this meeting is to drive forward on eliminating barriers to trade amongst provinces and territories. So we hope all 13 provincial and territorial First Ministers will be at that table with the Prime Minister of Canada to focus specifically on making faster and more significant progress immediately. Notre préférence comme gouvernement est de travailler évidemment avec les provinces et les territoires de façon collaborative. J'ai eu, par exemple, 2 bonnes discussions avec le nouveau ministre de l'Économie du Québec, Pierre Fitzgibbon, la semaine passée, et j'ai bien hâte de collaborer avec le gouvernement du Québec parce que c'est le Québec qui préside présentement le comité sur le commerce interne et le ministre Fitzgibbon et moi avons convenu de se rencontrer probablement dans les 2 prochaines semaines, mais j'ai hâte de travailler avec le leadership du ministre Fitzgibbon afin d'avancer précisément ce plan partagé, ce désir partagé de faire un progrès substantiel. Notre économie est beaucoup plus prospère quand nous avons des relations commerciales diversifiées entre les provinces et les territoires et bien sûr à l'échelle internationale aussi. Et oui, c'est vrai que cependant, le gouvernement fédéral dispose d'outils qui peuvent être utilisés pour apporter certains changements de façon unilatérale et nous avons et nous n'aurons pas peur de les utiliser. Mais nous savons que la façon canadienne de faire les choses est par le consensus et par la collaboration. Les gens s'attendent que leur gouvernement soit capable de travailler ensemble pour résoudre des problèmes aussi importants que la compétitivité économique et pour créer un meilleur environnement d'affaires et pour assurer notre compétitivité internationale aussi, mais aussi, finalement, un désir que tous les gouvernements expriment d'améliorer la vie de nos concitoyens. As I say to my counterparts in provincial and territorial governments, let's start focusing immediately on areas where we are close to the finish line. Let's make quick progress there. Let's build on the momentum, and let's use that momentum and the publicly expressed desire of most First Ministers, if not all First Ministers, to make real progress on this issue. Let's use that once and for all to tackle and overcome the stubborn barriers that continue to remain. My sense is that most of the provinces and territories are on the same page, as all of you, and certainly on the same page as our government. This is not and should not become a partisan issue. We can rise above political or partisan differences. Provinces and opposition parties should not put partisan challenges ahead of the health of our economy. Conservative premiers, Liberal premiers, and New Democratic premiers, and Coalition Avenir Québec premiers have all told me that they want us to make real progress together on this issue. So I see it as an opportunity where we can show Canadians that their governments can collaborate on something that will improve the economy of the whole country and be good for Canadian workers. We understand that to strengthen the economy and create good jobs, we need to get things right here at home. We need to ensure we have a modern economy that's efficient, effective, and ready to take on the opportunities that Canadian businesses are successfully finding globally. In our discussions, we will be guided by some very basic but essential principles. It should be easier and less costly to do business across our country. And we should all be able to buy goods and services from any part and every part of our country. So if we start from those two basic principles, I think with the help of organizations like yours, business leaders across the country, and obviously provincial and territorial partners, we can make lasting progress. I said to Michel when we came in, if you think that our government and Canadians were able to sign what we think is a very important and beneficial trade agreement with the United States and the Trump administration and the government of Mexico. And it really was a Team Canada effort. To be frank, provincial leaders, business leaders, all worked collaboratively with our government, with my colleague Chrystia Freeland, in a very much Canada-first approach to the renewal of NAFTA. That was a Team Canada effort, and I've participated in calls where the Prime Minister has told other premiers how much he appreciated their support and their work advocating on behalf of Canada in the United States. The same is true with business leaders. Well, if we brought that Team Canada, Canada-first approach to something as complicated as renegotiating NAFTA with the Trump administration and the government of Mexico, surely we can, as Canadian governments, work in the same constructive spirit to make real progress very quickly within Canada, because it's in the interest of the Canadian economy, it's in the interest of Canadian workers, and everybody has publicly expressed a desire to make real progress. So my job as Canada's Minister of Internal Trade will be not to lose that momentum and to ensure that the national government, but also to ensure that we work with provincial and territorial governments to make every inch of tangible progress we can as quickly as we can. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.